Boom.
political science study from Yale. Some undergraduates at Yale did this study, and the results are fascinating. So take a look at this. So Mika English, who's one of the people who did this study, Democrats have started using racial justice framing to promote their progressive policies. Like student debt relief is good because it will close the racial wealth gap. Is this language helpful for their cause? In a new working paper, Jay Calla, who's the other...
I like how you threw that out there, MG. So that's the gag, though, right? Like, student loan debt relief is good because it'll close the racial wealth gap. This is why it doesn't work, because it's a lie.
Dr. Dirty, you were one of the various people who talked about reparations. I've quoted you quite a bit in my work. When you think about ways to address the racial wealth gap and through the lens of reparations, like what's one of the most effective steps you think can be taken immediately?
Well, I want to thank Ryan for introducing reparations into the conversation. I've done a substantial amount of work on this topic, particularly in conjunction with my partner, Kirsten Mullen, and we have a new book on reparations that will be available in April called From Here to Equality. In the final chapter, we try to sketch how you might actually execute a reparations program. I think one of the critical things that we have to recognize is the magnitude of the racial wealth gap. And I think we've talked about the racial wealth gap here, but I don't think we've offered any numbers to give people a sense of the scale of that disparity. So if you were to examine the American population as a whole, Black Americans are about 13% of the nation's population, but Black Americans possess less than 3% of the nation's wealth. What that translates into at the average is an $800,000 differential per Black and white household. That is to say, the average Black household has $800,000 less in net worth than the average white household. And I'm talking about looking at the average or the mean instead of the median, which Ryan referred to, because 94% of the wealth that is held by white households is held by white households who have a net worth above the white median. And so if we're thinking about closing the racial wealth gap, we have to think about closing it at the mean rather than at the median to absorb the full differential in the proportion of wealth that's held by the two communities. So if you were to bring the Black share of wealth at least to the Black share of the population, it would require an additional at least $10 trillion. And so the other kinds of programs or initiatives that we're talking about are not going to come anywhere close to trying to eliminate or eradicate a gap at that magnitude. And so that's why we need to turn to something like a reparations program, which is specifically aimed at building Black assets to a level that would be comparable to the level of assets that are held by white Americans on average.
Researcher here says, we find no. Let me give you more. They say, racial equality frames and public policy support survey experimental evidence by Mika English and Joshua L. Calla. So here's the abstract. How do racial attitudes shape policy preferences in the era of Black Lives Matter and increasingly liberal views on racial issues? A large body of research finds that highlighting the benefits of progressive policies for racial minorities undermines support for those policies. However, Democratic elites have started centering race in their messaging on progressive public policies. To explore this puzzle, in this paper we offer an empirical test that examines the effect of describing an ostensibly race-neutral progressive policy with racial framing, as used by Democratic elites on support for that policy. To benchmark these effects, we compare a race policy frame with class.
Sorry, I don't want to, because I know we're going to actually go through the whole thing, but where was that race neutral policy for that fucking Asian, what's that shit?
Pacific Islanders, yeah.
No, that fucking shit that they just passed, that fucking, sorry.
Asian hate crime.
Thank you. Yes.
Yep.
Where was it for that? Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know who they're talking about when they say this.
Well, yeah, of course.
America's racist. This is a shocker. How do you change
Water
that?
is wet.
So this is the Morgan Freeman study. Don't talk about it, and it'll go away.
Yep. Don't talk about racism. It'll go away. Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about this is that they're trying to act like this is like an objective
Profound.
view.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're trying to act like this is objective, but we already know it's biased because it says Democratic elites. Like the only people that are saying this are the fucking socialist, class reductionist motherfuckers.
Yeah.
That's
But even in the study, they say they found counter evidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll talk more about it as we go.
Yeah.
John, you got anything on that before we move on?
Nah, y'all niggas killing this shit, man. I just KKK Kalinski, we just put so much pressure on that. They doubling down on class reductionism, man. Like they doubling down on anti-black class reductionism. This shit is fucking sickening, man.
Yeah.
Also notice. I'm sorry, John. Also notice this undergrads did this. These aren't grads. This isn't somebody's thesis.
Hey,
These undergrads did this.
Yo,
you know what I mean?
With the Yale. Fuck you with that.
Yeah.
I mean, G-Dub with the Yale, and he got an MBA from Harvard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said G-Dub with the Yale. And you feel me? Graduated with a C+. Like, so at the end of the day, it's like, all right, they bringing up this study. We know why. I'll get into it. You know what? I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna be quiet. I'm be fucking quiet. KKK Kalinski know what he's doing. He know he want to just take more of that. Yo, stop taking that shit out your mama medicine cabinet, man. You need to chill, man. You know what you're doing. The Eminem mama medicine cabinet. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. This anti-black bullshit. All right, let's keep it going. All right.
You got anything, Med?
Oh no, let's go.
Race and class and neutral policy frames. We demonstrate that despite leftward shifts in public attitudes towards issues of racial equality, racial framing decreases support for race-neutral progressive policies. Generally, the class frame most successfully increases support for progressive policies across racial and political subgroups. What do you know? So, in other words, the point being made here is a point that we've made a number of times on this show, which is even if you're somebody who prioritizes racial justice on its own as distinctly separate and apart from economic justice, even if this is the way you think about politics, the way in which you can get wins on racial issues is to frame them in a class kind of way. So in other words,
shut the fuck up, nigga. Shut the fuck up.
For white people. But when you start talking to black people, for you to get their interest, you have to talk about race. You need black people to win. So, yeah. Anything else, anybody? Go ahead. Go ahead, Mud. Please go.
Yeah. What he just said, the study said that people are turned off when you frame race neutral policies in a way that suggests that it's dealing with race. So obviously that's the problem. Like, okay, if it's a class policy, you need to label it like it's a class policy. But if you're actually going to deal with racial justice, you need to label it as racial justice. That's basically what it's saying. And like he's trying to construct it as in a way to saying that these class policies are actually dealing with the race problem, even though that the study is saying that it's not even supposed to be addressing the race problem. It's supposed to be talking about class. Like it's this bait and switch game they constantly do and think no one is following.
Yeah, that's a perfect point because I was going to say the same thing. As a matter of fact, I pull it up again. Let's read this. I'm gonna read this again. I'm gonna read this because Kyle read it. I'm gonna read it again. We demonstrate that despite leftward shifts in public attitudes towards issues of racial equality, racial framing decreases support for race neutral progressive policies. If it's race neutral, frame it as race neutral. Nobody's telling you to lie to people.
like Mud said, just say what it is. Stop saying stupid shit like we mentioned before. That 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 the that
No, it's the
closing what is it called?
it's the
It's a
Breonna
wealth gap.
Greyjoy shit. It's the
Yeah.
Breonna Greyjoy shit.
Yeah.
Oh, let's flame Medicare for all because it helps more black people because more black people die of health issues.
Yeah.
Or some
Student
stupid
debt.
shit like that.
Yeah. Stop framing student debt as a way to close
As the racial wealth gap because it's a lie. It's
Stop
a lie.
lying, progressives. That's what they're saying. Well,
and
frame
pause,
shit.
pause, MG. Since we're saying that it is a lie that it doesn't close the racial wealth gap, please go and read What We Get Wrong About Closing the Racial Wealth Gap by William Sandy Darity. No, because we can't just say it's a lie without telling people where to go read where the fuck it's a lie at.
Yeah, exactly.
So please go and read this. There's a whole study. White high school dropouts have more fucking wealth than black fucking college graduates, bachelor's degrees. So miss me with the bullshit.
Yeah. Well, there's the other study that
Don't Make It Rain.
He did no, it was Running the Numbers. That's the one he did. When
Is it in that one too? Oh yeah, because he's talking about Bernie.
Yeah, when he's talking about all those progressive policies,
running
like
the numbers on closing the racial wealth gap.
How all these policies impact the racial wealth gap, or don't, which most of them don't really impact it in any significant way, right? I think in that study called "Running the Numbers" by Sandy Darity from Duke University, I think they closed the gap by like $1,000, which is nothing. You know what I mean? That's nothing. Well, they can say it moving in that direction, I guess. But but when you were talking about the levels of wealth, the wealth gap we're talking about,